John Edwards, Jim Powers, Todd Schumacher inside the high school sports caravan, and unbelievable fellas that we've rolled through a football season already.
Absolutely, and it's hard to believe. It seems like it was just August when we were up at Francis Howell at the Jamborees, and now we're a couple days away from crowning a bunch of state champions, and three of them with a possibility from the St. Louis area.
Todd, it seems like just last week we were calling our first game of the season. We did our last game a couple of weeks ago. You were able to cover a Chaminade game, and this weekend 6 state championships will be crowned, and a busy time, especially in the St. Louis area with some of the teams.
Yeah, like Jim was saying, we had Francis Howell and Webster in week 1, and Francis Howell turned out to be a team that made a good run, and it's one of those things. So it all comes down to the cream of the crop, and that comes down to the dome and the championship games.
We've always talked about tradition over the last couple of years and the fact that it's always been the battle between Kansas City and St. Louis. St. Louis this year well represented at the Dome, starting with Class 6. CBC will be back for a second year in a row. This year they'll take on Blue Springs South. Probably, to me, will be the best football game of the weekend.
Yeah, I think that one's going to be an outstanding game in the Class 6. I'm also looking at the Class 4 game with Webb City and Kearney because I think those two teams match up very, very well. This isn't the invincible giant down in Webb City. I think there's a few, chinks in the armor this year that Kearney may be able to exploit. So yeah, I think that the games on Friday, I think, have all the possibilities to be just unbelievable games.
We'll start with Class 6, though. Like I said, I feel it's the premier game of the weekend, CBC and Blue Springs South. Todd, you and I saw the Blue Springs South team a couple weeks ago at Kirkwood. It was a well-balanced team. It was a team that brought a lot of pressure to a Kirkwood team, defeating them 41-17 at Kirkwood.
Yeah, they're a real balanced squad. And this is a team that was 5-6 last year. So for them to get to 13-0, ranked number 3 in the state, like you say, they're really balanced with their wide receiver core, led by Bradley Moore McKinney, and then you've got Adam Cofield coming from the backfield, and a quarterback that manages the game well. So like you say, very balanced, and they're a team that can also play great defense. They've really shut some teams down this year.
The question is, can CBC, we saw them last year take on Rockhurst, beat Rockhurst. This year, CBC, when we had a chance to talk to their head coach, Scott Pingle, he told us, hey, listen, I lost 5 of 7 starters in that defensive front, but really the defense has played well for them. The question is, could they stop a Blue Springs South team, which is really big up front?
And that's when, when we talked to Coach Pingle earlier today, I asked him about, did that game with the brother school down in Memphis, the CBC school down there, was that kind of the wake-up call a little bit? Because they got pushed around down there a little bit. Bad conditions, it was rainy, 5-hour travel. And he said that was probably something that we needed. And when you look at their schedule, yes, they needed a game like that because it gave them an opportunity to kind of see some different things that they haven't seen up here in the St. Louis area. No offense to anybody up here on their schedule. CBC's just been able to do what they've wanted at will against those teams, and they got pushed around a little bit against Memphis CBC. And in the first half of the Kickapoo game, they got pushed around a little bit. But you know what? When you've got Charlton at quarterback, you got Trey Bryant, you've got those big guys up front that are the workhorses of that team. They're going to be a very sound fundamental team. I think this is going to be one up front. I really honestly believe offensive line, defensive line, they're going to have to play really well against a very, very solid Blue Springs South squad.
Blue Springs South, to me, very big on the defensive side of the football. And when you talk about, Cofield, who's their linebacker, also plays running back. They're a very fast defensive team. They love to get after their quarterback. They actually blitz more than any other team that I've seen in the area. So I think it's going to be probably one of the best matchups throughout the weekend. One of the other St. Louis schools that's representing this weekend is Chaminade. They'll take on Fort Osage in Class 5. And Todd, you had a chance to see the Chaminade team last week in their semifinal game. This is a team that over the last couple of years is progressed in an upward trend, and they finally get to the show.
Yeah, last year they lost in the first round at districts to McClure North, and this is a team that just continues to grab some momentum. Their only losses to CBC, but no shame in that. A lot of teams have lost to CBC this year. But I look at we're talking about Blue Springs defense. Chaminade really has to play a strong defense in this game. They put 5 in front. They'll come off the edge. They've got a great linebacker in Luke Hanley that's got 120 plus tackles. It is important for them really to stick to their guns. They did a great job against Carthage, against a dangerous quarterback, and they're going to have to repeat that in the Dome if they're going to get the championship.
Fort Osage, we know that they're a big football team, Jim, and they're going to bring it to Chaminade.
Yeah, and this is a team that once again, they've run into some tough luck, and as their coach said this morning on the conference call, we just couldn't get through that semifinal game. Well, they got through this year, and they're big up front, and they are just so solid across the offensive line and defensive line. They're going to cause some issues for Chaminade. Much like we really anticipated Carthage doing the same thing last weekend, was creating some issues, and you kind of saw that in the first quarter with that game against Carthage, to where Chaminade had to make some adjustments. And I tell you what, they made some great adjustments and were able to handle a lot of the different looks that Carthage was throwing at them. Fort Osage, they're going to spread it out a little bit. They don't like to run the ball too often up, through the tackles. They like to get it out on the edge. They're a one-back offense. They've got a quarterback that's committed to K-State. They're going to be a very, very tough challenge for Chaminade. Chaminade's going to have to come out with the same mindset that they did against Carthage, because it's going to be the same type of game, except this time you're not playing in 30-degree weather. You're not playing on a muddy track. You're playing in the Dome on the turf. You got to make sure you're doing everything right in order to stay with a very high-powered Fort Osage team.
Fort Osage and Chaminade should be a good one as well. The other St. Louis school representing this weekend is going to be John Burroughs, and John Burroughs has been to the dance a few times. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
They you know what? If there's a year that I think John Merritt and the Bombers can finally get over the hump, I think it's this year. Tyler Foote has had a phenomenal year. They've got a sophomore running back in Bame that is just unbelievable. And they had a couple games this year that they got pushed. Lutheran South, a game that I had a chance to see, with a great running back. And in talking to Coach Merritt earlier today, he likened this Odessa team to this Lutheran South. Very good running back, very good quarterback, and a game like that gets you ready for moving through, especially to their conference. The Metro Conference has been so good for so many years with Westminster, Priory, and some of those schools. And those schools got them ready. But I just really think the Bombers, best shot, I think, to get a state championship. And for John Merritt, he's worked so hard, coached under Gus Farrat when Gus took the teams there, when Zeke was there. I really hope that they can get it, because John Merritt has paid his dues and has really done a phenomenal job.
I think when you talk about Odessa, they've got to play good defense. This is a Burroughs team that averages 41 points a game.
Yeah.
They want it to be a trap meet. And Odessa does play good defense, and they did knock off perennial power Maryville in the quarterfinals. But I just look at it and I say Burroughs, and they're young too.
Yeah, they're very young.
Quarterback and
Absolutely.
running back are sophomores. So you say in the last 6 years they've had 5 Final appearances, 1 Final Four appearances. I think there's more in store for this Burroughs team, not just this year.
It's good to see, especially John Burroughs, if they can get over the hump and get a victory this weekend. Valley Catholic in Class 1 will play in the final against Penny this weekend. And Valley Catholic, well, what do we talk about? A perennial powerhouse in Class 1, 14 state titles, tied with, when you're talking about titles in the state, they're tied with Webb City. Both of them are 14. Do they stay tied through the weekend, or does one get a leg up on another?
Well, I don't think it's perennial power. They are a power. And, Judd Nager has done such a great job in taking the reins of that team and really, year in and year out. They just crank out great teams. They crank out championships. And they do it with a very even, balanced offense. They do favor the run, but they've got a phenomenal quarterback in Bossler. And, we saw him play in the baseball championships. This kid is as legit as it gets. We were kidding, that he hit a home run up at T.R. Hughes Ballpark during the base that we still don't think has landed yet. It's still probably orbiting, O'Fallon at some point. But they are just so good. And once again, you just talk about programs. And they've got a great program. Webb City, it's about a program. And that's what, if there's a blueprint to win as much as they do, that's where you're seeing it, because they have really built a program down there.
Yeah, you talk about Penny and you say, man, you hope they have a chance and try to make it competitive. They were the last team to trip up Valley in 2012 at the Dome. But I think the balanced attack and the aerial attack, especially in Class 1, you don't usually see a quarterback throwing for 50-plus touchdowns, but Bosler has done that. They're a lot to handle, and if I was going to say, I would say Valley and Webb City continue their streak of state championship.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. And then once again, they just do so many great things. And once again, it's going to come down to, can Penny hang with them? And it's been Penny, it's been Valley over the past bunch of years playing for that state championship. And, they've developed a pretty good rivalry. They're not natural rivals, so to say, territorial-wise. But when you get to the Dome, it's as good as a rivalry as you're going to see in the state of Missouri in the championship game.
And this is a Valley team that they've had a couple, close games. In fact, the last 2 games came down to like the last minute. One was a field goal, one was a touchdown. So they're not untouchable, but on paper, you say, man, there's just too much there for Penny to handle.
Right.
Over in Class 2, you have Lamar taking on Malden, and Lamar was there last year. They won a state championship, and they're probably favorites to win again this weekend.
There's no doubt about it. And, Scott Bailey, once again, it's a program. They're looking for number 5 in a row. And they run such a neat offense. Unless they've changed things up this year, they'll put both their quarterbacks in the backfield. And depending upon what play is going to be called, that's who the center is going to give the ball to. They run so much misdirection. I just really don't know if Malden has seen a team like this. Now, they've had some great competition this year, an instant classic with Cardinal Ritter in the playoffs a few weeks ago, but I just don't think that Malden is going to know what hit them. This in a game, if you talk about all 6 classes, if there's somebody that I think is a 100% lock, I think it's Lamar. I think Lamar is going to take care of their business in a big fashion.
And they're very, very fast,
Oh,
too.
yeah.
So.
And finally, Webb City, well, it doesn't. I don't think it's really going to matter, and that's no disrespect to who Webb City's playing, but I think we all feel across the board that Webb City's going to win again, and that's pretty much a lock.
I think Webb City wins, but I think Webb City gets pushed. This is not the typical Webb City team. They've been beat up with injuries. Their starting quarterback missed 3 games earlier in the year. They've gone through a meat grinder of a schedule. Playing, Rockhurst and then playing Springdale Harbor out of, down in the Arkansas area. But Kearney is going to present a lot of issues for them. And in talking to Coach Roderick earlier today, he's really concerned about up front. They've got some kids on Kearney's side on the defensive line that are just big and fast and can move people. It's going to be up to the O-line for Webb City. Do I think they're going to win? I think so. But I don't think it's going to be the blowout that maybe everybody down in the southwestern corner thinks, or even around the state. I think this has the possibility of being one of the best games of the weekend.
Well, and I agree with Jim. This is not the regular steamroller of a Webb City team because they were challenged by Carl Junction. And Carl Junction took them to the brink. Like you say, they've had some tough games. They're number 17 in the country according to USA Today. But to be quite honest, I think some of the past teams would probably rank higher than this.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Some of the teams that have won, over the last 5-6 years, I think are way better than this team. But I think with this team, I think they're a little bit more controlled. And they do things a little bit more fundamentally. They don't maybe have the best athletic scheme of things, but I think this team is more fundamentally sound than maybe some of the other teams that John Roderick's had in the past.
No doubt it's going to be a full weekend of high school football action at the Edward Jones Dome. You can catch all the games on Misha.tv, including the 8-man game on Friday morning starting at 9:30. We want to thank one of our fine sponsors, Winning Streak, the apparel of us here at the High School Sports Caravan. They do a fantastic job. Find them at winning-streak.com. You can call them 618-277-8191. For Jim Powers, Todd Schumacher, John Edwards, we appreciate you watching. Thanks to all our friends here at DeSmet High School for taking care of us, especially John Hockey. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you next week.